So how are you doing? I'm being rude by talking about me and shoving
No, you're great. I'm doing
juice
great.
pops all day.
I'm where do I start? Um,
Anywhere you
Doing
like.
some continuing legal education stuff to get my license active again. I've been doing legal journalism stuff for several years now, and as well as, believe it or not, some like basically like in the US, there was this interesting phenomenon and opportunity for criminal justice reform starting in 2016, where
Yes.
basically George Soros started pouring millions of dollars into local prosecutor elections. And I was a big part of that movement to try to get progressive, basically less carceral, less punitive prosecutors elected. Unfortunately, in the last year or so, because of rising gun violence predominantly in the US, we've lost a lot of headway, and now the movement is largely collapsing, which is sucky, obviously. But it was an honor to work on that while it was going on. Now I'm looking to to do some other things and do some active practice stuff again. But yeah, so that was interesting. And then otherwise, on like a personal level, my wife and I had a baby 5 months ago, so that's been
Congratulations!
Really yeah,
Congratulations!
Yeah. So that's been a big part of my focus. But I stumbled. Well, so I'll tell you that basically, like, when working on the criminal justice reform stuff in America, so much of it is focused on like the quote unquote low hanging fruit of like drug crimes and stuff like that. And partly because that's fun. What trends. Yeah, that's what trends on Twitter and whatever. And so I, using the influence I had at some of the organizations I was a part of, I helped further the ball a little bit on some registry reform stuff because I think it's really important. But basically, I was always frustrated because I felt like I was one of the very few people who were not, on the registry arguing that we should have reform. It's not just me. There's a couple of other people too.
I agree.
Obviously. And obviously, somebody like Janice, why am I forgetting her last name right now? Yeah, she's like a one-woman army of litigation. She's amazing. So basically, I started thinking more about the fact that, trying to win in like the cultural or philosophical spheres in America about registry reform is obviously incredibly difficult. And then I started thinking, what does Europe do basically? And, I read about different European systems, and I was like, wow, like not only do they not have this like public shaming, public registry aspect, which is very dangerous, for registrants and their families. But for the most part, I know that Poland has a limited public registry and things like that, but like they don't even, even Poland, which has gone like far right lately, and very like scared, tough on crime and whatever, like they'll list the city somebody lives in, but they won't list the address.
Look at Finland, which actually debated the registry in their I'm going to call it parliament because everybody has a different name for it.
Whatever it is, yeah.
And actively rejected the registry. Sweden, Norway, Iceland not only rejected the idea of a registry, but turned around and strengthened their privacy laws for those accused of crimes.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
The prime minister actually made a statement that the privacy of I'm going to say sex offenders. I really hate that word for a variety of legal reasons. Or I should say logic-based reasons. But they rejected it, saying that, number one, if someone is falsely accused, you have ruined their lives. Number two, if someone is rightfully accused, but then is rehabilitated, you have again destroyed their chance to reintegrate in society, because obviously Europe is taking the position that effective reintegration makes society safer than strict incarceration.
Right, for sure. And I think another part of it. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I think that the other piece of it that's really interesting to me too is that I've obviously read a good bit about risks to family members who live with somebody on the registry in America, and And then I compared that in like, just in a kind of thought experiment. I was like, what happens to like the family members of former like top Nazis, like some of them at Nuremberg, for example, did go home after 20 years or so. Literally. Well,
11. I read a case today where the guy was convicted, sentenced to life, that was reduced to 11 years. And he was actively involved in the murder of 10,000 prisoners.
Right, exactly.
And it goes back to that old adage, if you kill a man, you're a murderer. If you kill 10,000, you're a conqueror.
Right, kind of. Yeah, no, it's true. So, and I'm not saying, oh, like poor Holocaust perpetrators or anything. Obviously, they deserve what they get.
We're talking about justice and balance. That's what we're discussing.
And like, and also just like the fact that like, say, like I know, for example, I read about a case where one of the guys who was convicted at Nuremberg, he was like, he wasn't as high level, but he got like 20 years, right? Okay. And so he was able to go home. He moved in with like his nephew or something like that, right? And like, if this were like the US, that nephew would have had like a target on his head for vigilante violence.
Was that Albert Speer?
It wasn't Speer. I don't think Speer moved in with a relative. It was, I think it was like von Neurath or something, or maybe.
I wish you hadn't said that, because now I'm going to spend the evening hunting that down. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that Speer like did like communicate with his relatives and stuff. I think he lived by himself after release. But the point is that like, anyone who would have lived in a home with any of those people convicted at Nuremberg or other Nazi trials, they would have been like, they could have been hunted down by vigilantes themselves without, they're just like the kid, they were
did happen a few times.
Right. And like in the US,
instances.
Yeah, in the US with the registry, like, people's wives have been murdered, like registrants' wives have been murdered. Like, I'm sure, I think there's at least one instance of one of their kids being killed because of it. And it's like, I do wonder, so like when I'm building the article, I'm obviously the Article 8 of the ECHR, like privacy aspect is compelling, but I actually have started thinking too about adding a section on Article 3, which is like cruel and unusual punishment. Obviously, the US doesn't take it seriously, but.
Well, that's the very clause that caused the United States not to sign the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
That makes sense. Yeah. And
they don't want to be held to this. But that's what pisses me off. And feel free to mention this. Not that I'm pissed off, but feel free to mention that the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt drafted the UDHR. She's the one that drafted it. And I'm telling you what you already know, surely. But the United States is one of the very few nations that refused to sign it because they didn't want to be held accountable to it. So the United States is happy to point fingers at China and Chechnya and all these other places. Meanwhile, they refuse to sign the document. To go further, how the hell do they have the right to sit on the Security Council for Human Rights when they're not even a signatory?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's just raw power.
I should sit on the Islamic Fundamental Council. I'm not Muslim.
Right, exactly. No, I completely agree with you. And I think that like, there's just such a cast of like powerful law enforcement people in America. And, I would say that there's some crossover with like the military industrial complex as well, because a lot of people like come home from wars and then become prosecutors or cops or whatever. And they're just unflinching. They don't believe certain people get human rights. That's how they believe.
I think that's a portion of it. Can I go one step further than that?
Of course.
Or one behind that. From the outside perspective of a European, after 4 years in Europe, I can't really consider myself truly American anymore.
Right.
We see things differently here. If you're on a train and you're sitting on that train and I call you and say, listen, you need to jump out the window now because the train is headed for a bridge that's blown out. You can't see forward. You can only see out the sides. You can only see what's inside. And so you're going to tell me, oh, you're crazy. And you're going to stay on the train, you go over, you die. I understand that. But I'm sitting on the hill overlooking the rail in the valley. I can see the train from another perspective, and I can see the bridge is wiped out.
Right.
And I'm trying to get you to listen to me, but you're just not going to believe. I think part of the problem is that you have these baby boomers who have been told their entire lives that America is great. They do the best at everything. They are the leaders of the free world, and it's propaganda, and they believe it, as though Germany isn't a free country, or Norway, or pick somewhere, Canada.
It's insane. It's insanity.
But it's the arrogance,
right?
And not knowing your religious, your political opinions, but I'm outspoken that Trump is a madman who is driving.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm solidly left. Yeah.
Okay. I'm center left, and I am terrified about the religious extremism that has now taken over the Supreme Court.
Oh
and that is where now Janice and I have these discussions, and we have a very good relationship, even though we don't agree on everything. I believe that if I'm a Miami Dolphin fan, born and raised, I still follow their games over here.
That's awesome.
If it were capable of happening, I know it can't because they're in the same conference, but if the Miami Dolphins were going to play the New England Patriots with Tom Brady as quarterback in Boston using local referees, I'm not even going to the game. They can't win. They're not going to allow me to win.
Right.
That is how I feel about Narsal and Axel.
Yes.
I love that you're trying. But you are literally fighting in a system where the top court is never going to allow you to win.
I think that's true. That's part of the reason I'm looking into the European angle. Yeah.
Change. I'm not saying leave the fight. I'm not saying change the game. I'm saying change the playing field. Let's get a more balanced playing field. Because here in Germany particularly, the German courts are known for being independent and about the law. And they make decisions that are unpopular sometimes based on the fact that this is what the law is. This is what our, are you familiar with the German constitutional setup?
To a degree.
Okay, so we have the Grundsatz. We don't have a constitution. We have what's called the basic law.
Right, yep.
Grundgesetz. So the Grundgesetz says A, B, C, and D. That's the way it is.
Yes.
Politics don't get to play a role. And so here we get a much fairer, more fair than I thought, more fair than I expected.
Yeah.
We get a much better chance of arguing this case. The idea being, now there's what I'm doing is multifaceted. I did not come here. Well, I did come here for my own sake, my own skin in the beginning, but it has morphed into something different. I'm going to assume that you know that we formed a human rights organization over here, and that's where I'm working. And we believe that Europe is a balanced playing field right now, and we want to keep it that way.
Yes.
And so what we're doing, I say we, what me and a couple lawyers are doing, that's terrible English. What a couple of lawyers and I are doing.
You're fine.
I'm really anal about proper English. Is we're picking the cases that we think we can get into a German or Danish or Dutch court to get the precedent that we need. Each precedent is a brick in the wall that we are going to build to ensure that American craziness does not come over here.
That's a really good idea.
We don't want to change the law here. No. Keep it.
Right.
Some things have changed recently, and I'm iffy. I am one, and I know you have questions. I just feel like I need to explain myself for a moment.
Yeah, no, this is great.
I believe in prisons.
Yes.
I have met people who need to stay in prison. I have known them. I can give you their names. They are dangerous. I know a few out here that should have stayed in prison. And I mean that. I believe in the police. And I understand that policemen are human beings, which means you have those that follow the rules closely. You have the average who's trying to just do his job and go home at the end of the day. And then you've got the do-gooder who's out there to change the world. Prisoners are the same thing. It's a spectrum. Human beings are human beings. So we need courts. Are you time constrained?
No, nope.
Okay. I see you looking at something. I assumed it was a clock.
Oh no, I just.
Or are you a thinker like me? I look up when I think.
Yeah, I am actually. Yeah.
So we need prisons. We need prosecutors. We need judges. We need prisons. We need laws that protect the most vulnerable. I'm completely in favor of that. What I'm not in favor of is turning those things into a business or using it to political ends, which is what I think the sex offender registry is, because you can't use blacks as the boogeyman anymore. You can't use Jews anymore. anymore. You can't use women anymore.
Right.
Sex offenders, they're perfect. You can't even use the gays anymore, but that's going to come back, I think.
Yeah.
It's already starting to come back. So it's the perfect boogeyman, because even if you try to defend them, you're guilty. You're as guilty as the worst.
It's true.
So, in favor of those things. On some things, I think Europe is too lax. For instance, it was only 5 years ago that child pornography, hear what I'm saying, child pornography became a felony.
Right.
5 years ago. Before that, it was a civil fine. Now, of course, Germany, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but Germany does not have child pornography. Here means child pornography.
Right.
Not under 18.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And even if the child, if one child engages in child pornography with another child, if those two children can be deemed to be in some sort of relationship, then it's considered privileged communication.
Right. Yeah. No, I am aware that, for example, Germany's system is interesting. Actually, one of like kind of a side issue that I'm interested in here is like, but not for this article, but just something that I found and was very intrigued by is that like Germany and France and Sweden and maybe Finland and a handful of other countries have like a personal use exemption if an older partner of somebody over the age of consent for sex, if they exchange stuff and it's private and they don't share it, which makes sense. So like, you know, if you're in a state in the United States and you have a legal relationship with somebody who's over, say the age of consent in the state is 16, like obviously, you know this, they're going to get like production of child pornography and be treated like the worst person who ever lived and like have their life destroyed and probably spend like 30 years. It's insane.
Do you remember back when we used to have the Dorst test for child pornography?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, and that said, for a photograph or video to be deemed pornographic, it has to meet. Dorst was specifically for.
Oh yes, yeah, I am familiar with it. Yeah,
Dorst, then they removed elements from it to where now it used to be if the child was unclothed. Now the child can be fully clothed.
Right.
And the intent, the element that is most important is if it can be deemed to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Not
like lascivious or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but if it appeals to the prurient interest of the viewer.
Right.
What?
So basically, Britney Spears videos from the 90s are pornography.
Oh my God, I've argued that. I have actually argued that. I have stood in the day room. You can imagine I was a lot of fun in prison. I have argued with men in the day room who would challenge me. Some, not most, did not give a damn, because I was in a high security, max security unit after the escape, and most of these men I'd been doing time with for 20 years. We were all old-time convicts, so we know each other, and there's nothing to prove. Some of the newer guys would mock me and say, "Oh, you're," because what would happen is Justin Bieber, back in the height of his popularity, would come on TV, and a lot of the older convicts would call me and say, "Hey, your boy's on TV." So I'd come watch for a minute. And then some of the guys would say, "Oh, that's it. Bitch, I didn't say shit to you when you were watching Britney Spears and her bikini. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it."
Right, exactly.
So don't give me that double standard. I was very vocal.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
In case you didn't know.